The message from Dr. Elena Vasquez reached Earth. Within 6 hours through the quantum communication system the aliens had installed in orbit around Luna, President Helen Carter was in the middle of a routine cabinet meeting when her chief of staff burst through the doors with an expression that made everyone in the room fall silent. The news he carried would change everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the universe. Within 2 hours, every major world leader was connected through secure video links as President Carter convened an emergency session of the newly formed Interstellar Defense Committee. The holographic displays showed star charts that most humans had never seen before, marking the advancing Devourer fleet as it swept through galaxy sectors with names they could barely pronounce. The scale of destruction was beyond anything Earth had ever imagined possible. General Ryan Walsh, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, studied the tactical data with the careful eye of someone who had spent 30 years learning how to fight wars. His weathered face showed no emotion as he absorbed the information, but those who knew him could see the tension building in his shoulders. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "They're not just asking for soldiers," General Walsh said, pointing to the holographic display that showed entire solar systems going dark. "They're asking us to become the galaxy's army, to take our most destructive capabilities and use them against an enemy that treats entire civilizations like cattle. This isn't a peacekeeping mission. This is total warfare against something that exists to consume everything it encounters." Admiral Lisa Chun leaned forward in her chair as she examined the reports from alien survivors. Her background in naval strategy had taught her to look for patterns in enemy behavior, and what she was seeing made her blood run cold. The Devourers didn't fight like any military force she had ever studied. They fought like a natural disaster given intelligence and purpose. "Look at these battle reports," Admiral Chun said, highlighting sections of text on her tablet. "The aliens keep trying to engage them in traditional fleet combat, maintaining formations and following established rules of engagement, but the Devourers ignore all of that. They phase through shields, absorb energy weapons, and turn the aliens' own technology against them. These advanced civilizations are fighting a chess match while their enemy is playing a completely different game." Dr. Alex Martinez, Earth's leading expert on alien psychology and behavior, raised concerns that went beyond military strategy. His research into the various species that made up the Galactic Council had revealed something troubling about how they approached conflict. They had become so civilized, so removed from their violent origins, that they had forgotten how to adapt when faced with true existential threat. "We need to understand what we're really being asked to do here," Dr. Martinez said, his voice filled with worry. "These species have spent thousands of years evolving beyond violence. They've built societies based on cooperation and peaceful coexistence. Now they want us to go out there and fight a war using methods they've deliberately forgotten. But what happens to us in the process? What happens to our humanity when we become the galaxy's weapon?" The debate that followed lasted for hours as world leaders grappled with the implications of the alien request. Some argued that Earth should stay out of a galactic conflict that wasn't their responsibility. Others pointed out that if the Devourers continued their advance, they would eventually reach Earth anyway. The discussion grew heated as representatives from different nations voiced their concerns and opinions. President Carter listened to every argument before making the decision that would define humanity's future among the stars. She had been elected on a platform of peace and cooperation, but she also understood that sometimes protecting innocent life required difficult choices. When she finally spoke, her words carried the authority of someone who had considered every possible consequence. "We've spent the last century learning to control our violent impulses," President Carter said, looking directly into the camera that would broadcast her words to the world. "We've channeled our aggression into protection rather than conquest, learned to use our strength to defend rather than dominate. If these creatures threaten innocent life across the galaxy, then we'll show them exactly why humans survived when other species might have chosen extinction." The mobilization began immediately as military bases around the world shifted into high gear. Colonel Danny Brooks, a veteran of 3 different conflicts, was put in charge of selecting the first wave of volunteers. His job wasn't to find the biggest or strongest soldiers, but to identify those who could adapt to fighting an enemy unlike anything humanity had ever faced. He needed people who understood that winning sometimes meant doing things that others couldn't or wouldn't do. The selection process revealed something interesting about human nature that the aliens had only partially understood. When faced with an existential threat to innocent life, humans didn't just volunteer to fight, they competed for the chance to serve. Applications poured in from every branch of the military, from police forces, from firefighters, and even from civilians who had never held a weapon but understood that some fights were worth joining. Lieutenant Sarah Kane was among the first to be selected for the mission. Her experience in asymmetric warfare had taught her that victory didn't always go to the side with better technology or superior numbers. Sometimes it went to the side that was willing to think differently, to use tactics that the enemy couldn't predict or counter. Her psychological profile showed someone who could adapt quickly to changing situations and maintain focus under extreme stress. "We're not going out there to play by their rules," Lieutenant Kane told her assembled squad during their first briefing. "The aliens have been fighting this war like it's some kind of formal duel, following procedures and protocols that were designed for conflicts between civilized species. But the Devourers aren't civilized, and neither are we when we need to survive. We're going to remind the galaxy why humans are still here when so many other species have been consumed by their own success." The preparation phase revealed just how different human approaches to warfare really were. While alien species developed elaborate battle plans based on mathematical models and strategic theory, human commanders focused on flexibility and adaptation. They trained their soldiers to think independently, to make decisions based on immediate circumstances rather than predetermined protocols. Captain Maria Santos was selected to command humanity's first interstellar warship, a vessel that would be built specifically for fighting the Devourers. As she reviewed the alien technology that would be incorporated into the ship's design, she couldn't help but notice how advanced civilizations had made warfare too complicated. Their weapons were elegant and efficient, but they lacked the brutal simplicity that had made human conflicts so devastating throughout history. "Look at these alien battle reports," Captain Santos said to her engineering team. "They maneuver like they're performing a ballet, every movement calculated and precise. No wonder they're losing. War isn't an art form, it's a survival mechanism. When someone is trying to eat you, you don't worry about fighting fair, you worry about making sure they never get the chance to try again." The final phase of preparation involved something that troubled many of the human commanders, but was necessary for success. They had to teach their soldiers to embrace the very aspects of human nature that civilization had spent centuries trying to control: aggression, ruthlessness, and the willingness to do whatever was necessary to protect innocent life, even if it meant becoming something that others might fear. As the first human ships prepared to leave Earth's solar system, Admiral June addressed the assembled crews one final time. Her words would be remembered long after the war was over, becoming part of the legend of humanity's entry onto the galactic stage. She spoke not just as a military commander, but as someone who understood that they were about to change the course of galactic history forever. The human fleet that assembled at the edge of the solar system looked nothing like the graceful alien vessels that had been fighting the Devourers for months. Where alien ships curved and flowed like works of art, human warships were angular blocks of metal and armor that seemed designed for one purpose only: to survive long enough to destroy their enemies. The contrast was so stark that many alien observers wondered if humans had misunderstood the concept of space warfare entirely. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching through the viewscreen as her alien escort maintained perfect formation around the human fleet. Every ship flew in precise patterns that had been calculated by computers and refined over thousands of years of peaceful space travel. To human eyes, they looked like they were participating in an elaborate parade rather than preparing for the most dangerous mission in galactic history. Commander Ben Torres, Her executive officer shook his head as he watched the alien ships through his tactical display. His 20 years of naval experience had taught him to recognize when someone was fighting to look good rather than fighting to win. The aliens moved with mathematical precision, but there was no aggression in their maneuvers, no sense that they were prepared to do whatever it took to achieve victory. "Look at them fly," Captain Santos muttered, pointing to the alien formation that surrounded them. Perfect spacing, textbook formations, every movement coordinated down to the millisecond. No wonder they've been losing this war. They're fighting, like they're trying to impress someone instead of trying to kill their enemy. The human approach to space combat was radically different from anything the galaxy had seen before. Human ships would suddenly break formation without warning, execute seemingly random maneuvers that made no sense to alien observers, and coordinate attacks through methods that appeared chaotic but were devastatingly effective. The aliens had spent so long fighting with honor and precision that they had forgotten war was not about looking good. It was about making sure your enemy could never threaten anyone again, Lieutenant. Sarah Kane's ground forces were equally unconventional in their approach to warfare. While alien soldiers advanced with coordinated precision, following battle plans that had been tested in computer simulations, human troops employed guerrilla tactics that changed based on real-time conditions. They used psychological warfare, adaptive strategies, and a willingness to take risks that left their alien allies both impressed and deeply concerned. The first real test of human military doctrine came at the Calari system, where long-range sensors had detected a small Devourer scout force moving toward a civilian population center. The alien fleet positioned itself for a traditional engagement, expecting to maintain safe distances while exchanging fire with weapons that could destroy entire cities. It was the same approach they had used against every enemy for the past 3,000 years. Captain Santos had different ideas about how the battle should be fought. Instead of maintaining formation and engaging at maximum range, she ordered her ships to charge directly at the Devourer vessels. The alien commanders watched in horror as human warships accelerated toward certain destruction, apparently ignoring every principle of space combat that civilized species had developed over millennia of warfare. The Devourers, accustomed to opponents who valued their ships and crews above all else, were completely unprepared for humans who treated their vessels as expendable weapons. Human ships charged through the enemy formation, firing at point-blank range and ramming damaged Devourer vessels when their weapons ran out of ammunition. It was a style of fighting that defied every logical principle of space warfare, and it worked perfectly. Commander Xylo of the Zephyrian escort fleet watched the battle unfold with a mixture of amazement and terror. His people had been fighting the Devourers for months, losing ship after ship in carefully planned engagements that followed established military doctrine. Now he was watching a human captain deliberately sacrifice her own vessel to destroy an enemy ship twice its size, and her crew was cheering as they prepared for the collision. "They fight like they have no fear of death," Commander Xylo said to his tactical officer, unable to look away from the brutal spectacle. "They charge into certain destruction without hesitation, as if dying in battle is somehow preferable to retreating to fight another day." His tactical officer, a young Zephyrian who had studied human culture, shook his crystalline head slowly. "That's not quite right, sir. They do fear death, but they fear failure more. They would rather die fighting than live knowing they could have done more to protect innocent life. There is a difference between not fearing death and believing some things are worth dying for." The human approach to boarding actions was even more shocking to their alien allies. When Devourer ships were disabled but not destroyed, alien protocol called for careful reconnaissance and systematic clearing of hostile vessels. Human Marines had a simpler approach. They would blast through the hull and fight their way to the command center, accepting heavy casualties in exchange for speed and surprise. Lieutenant Kane led one of these boarding actions personally, taking her squad through a breach in a Devourer ship that was still firing its weapons. The alien observers expected the humans to be overwhelmed by the hostile environment and superior enemy technology. Instead, they watched human soldiers adapt to conditions that would have paralyzed other species, using improvised weapons and tactics that turned the Devourers' own technology against them. The results of the first engagement were beyond anything the aliens had hoped for. Not only had the human fleet destroyed the entire Devourer scout force, they had done it without losing a single ship. More importantly, they had captured intact Devourer technology and prisoners, something that no other galactic force had managed to accomplish during months of desperate fighting. The alien commanders requested a meeting with Captain Santos to understand how humans had achieved such a decisive victory. What they learned during that conversation would change their understanding of warfare forever. The humans hadn't won because they had better technology or superior numbers. They had won because they approached the problem of fighting the Devourers from a completely different perspective. You keep trying to fight them like they're another civilized species, Captain Santos explained to the assembled alien officers. You use the same tactics that work against opponents who follow the same rules you do. But the Devourers don't follow any rules except survival of the strongest. To beat them, you have to be willing to become something they don't expect and can't counter. The success at Calleri system spread throughout the galaxy faster than the speed of light, carried by quantum communication networks that connected every major civilization. For the first time since the Devourer invasion began, there was hope that the threat could be stopped. But that hope came with a growing unease about the methods their human saviors were willing to employ. Admiral June received multiple requests from council members asking her to moderate human tactics to fight more honorably and with greater regard for the established rules of galactic warfare. Her response was diplomatically phrased but carried an unmistakable message that would define humanity's relationship with the galaxy for generations to come. You asked us to save your civilizations from an enemy that was consuming everything you held dear, Admiral Chun replied during a secure communication with the Galactic Council. We are doing exactly what you requested. If you wanted us to lose gracefully while following your rules of engagement, you should have been more specific in your request for help. The front lines began to stabilize for the first time in months. As human forces took over primary combat operations, where alien fleets had been steadily retreating, human ships pushed forward with aggressive tactics that confused and disrupted Devourer strategies. The enemy had grown accustomed to opponents who fought defensively, trying to minimize their own losses while slowly wearing down the invaders through attrition. Humans fought differently, accepting casualties in exchange for decisive victories that eliminated entire Devourer formations. They used tactics that other species considered wasteful or even suicidal, but which produced results that traditional approaches could never achieve. The galaxy was learning that sometimes the only way to preserve civilization was to employ people who understood that some fights were worth any price. As the war dragged on for months, the galaxy began to see what they had truly unleashed when they asked humanity for help. Human forces didn't just fight the Devourers, they adapted to become something their enemy couldn't understand or predict. Where other species had been broken by the psychological warfare the Devourers employed, humans seemed to grow stronger under pressure, turning their fear and anger into weapons more deadly than any technology the galaxy had ever produced. Major Rick Coleman found himself leading the longest sustained ground campaign in human military history as his forces pushed deeper into Devourer-controlled territory. His battalion had been fighting continuously for 3 weeks without relief, advancing through hostile terrain that had broken the will of a dozen different alien civilizations. The Devourers had turned entire planets into nightmare landscapes designed to drive invaders insane with fear and despair. The alien high command suggested that Coleman's forces should withdraw and regroup after suffering what they considered unacceptable casualties. By galactic standards, losing even 10% of a military unit was considered a devastating defeat that required immediate retreat and reorganization. But Coleman's battalion had lost 30% of its original strength and was still advancing, their determination growing stronger with each battle they fought. We didn't come this far just to turn around and run, Coleman told the alien commanders during a heated strategy meeting. These creatures want to devour the galaxy and turn every living being into their servants. They can try to break us all they want, but they're going to choke on us before we let them hurt another innocent person. The human capacity for controlled violence began to change the fundamental nature of the war itself. Devourer forces that had grown comfortable with easy victories found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to become more dangerous the longer they fought. Human soldiers developed countermeasures for devourer mind control techniques, turning the enemy's own psychological weapons against them in ways that left even their alien allies disturbed. Lieutenant Kane's Special Operations Unit made a discovery that horrified the galactic community but proved crucial to understanding how to fight the Devourers effectively. During a raid on a Devourer facility, they found that the creatures used captured sentient beings as living batteries, feeding off their life force while keeping them conscious and aware of their fate. Most alien rescue teams that had encountered similar situations had been paralyzed with horror and unable to function. Kane's team reacted differently. Instead of being overwhelmed by what they witnessed, they processed the information and used it to develop new tactics, specifically designed to rescue victims and eliminate devourer feeding operations. Their methods were brutal and efficient, prioritizing the saving of lives over adherence to traditional rules of engagement that the aliens considered sacred. The difference between us and them isn't that we don't feel horror at what we see, Kane explained to her Zephyrian liaison officer after a particularly difficult mission. We just refuse to let that horror paralyze us. We take that emotional energy and channel it into making sure these creatures never get the chance to hurt anyone else. Fear is just another weapon if you know how to use it properly. The alien observers began to express serious concerns about their human allies as reports of increasingly aggressive tactics reached the Galactic Council. Human forces were achieving unprecedented success against the Devourers, but their methods included interrogation techniques, technological adaptation processes, and combat strategies that many species found deeply troubling. The humans were winning, but at what cost to their own humanity? Dr. Alex Martinez, still serving as Earth's primary liaison with the alien governments, found himself fielding constant complaints about human military conduct. The aliens wanted their saviors to fight more like civilized beings, to show mercy to captured enemies, and to follow the established laws of warfare that had governed galactic conflicts for thousands of years. His responses to these concerns became increasingly blunt as the war continued. You came to us because your civilized approach to warfare wasn't working, Martinez reminded the council during one particularly tense session. You asked us to save your species from extinction, and that's exactly what we're doing. If you want us to fight politely while your people are being consumed by monsters, you should have mentioned that in your original request for help. The turning point came when human forces captured their first intact Devourer command vessel. Using methods that horrified their alien allies, human technicians and interrogation specialists worked around the clock to extract information from both the ship's systems and its surviving crew. The techniques they employed pushed the boundaries of what galactic civilization considered acceptable, but they produced results that no other approach had achieved. Captain Santos led the team that boarded the captured Devourer ship, bringing with her specialists who understood that sometimes obtaining vital intelligence required doing things that peaceful societies preferred to avoid. The aliens watched in fascination and growing unease as humans systematically dismantled Devourer technology, reverse-engineered their weapons systems, and extracted tactical information through methods that bordered on torture. The information they obtained revealed the location of the Devourer home system and the central command structure that coordinated their entire invasion force. More importantly, it showed the humans how to modify their own weapons to be truly effective against Devourer defenses. The technical knowledge gained from that single captured ship changed the course of the entire war. Admiral Chun found herself dealing with increasing pressure from alien governments who wanted humanity to moderate its approach to fighting the Devourers. They appreciated the results human forces were achieving, but they were becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the methods being employed. The aliens wanted to win the war without compromising their moral principles, something that human military leaders found both admirable and dangerously naive. War is not a philosophical exercise, Admiral Chun explained to a group of alien diplomats who had requested a meeting to discuss human tactics. When someone is trying to eliminate your entire species, you don't have the luxury of fighting. Fair. We're doing what needs to be done to save innocent lives, and we're not going to apologize for being effective at it. The success of human forces began to create unexpected problems for the galactic community. Other species started requesting human military advisors to help them defend their own territories. Some civilizations began studying human tactical manuals and trying to adopt human approaches to warfare. The galaxy was learning that sometimes survival required embracing aspects of their nature they had spent millennia trying to suppress. Major Coleman's forces finally reached the outer defenses of the primary Devourer stronghold in their sector, a massive facility that had been consuming the life force of captured beings for decades. The alien commanders expected the assault to take months of careful planning and gradual advancement. Instead, Coleman requested permission to attempt a direct assault that would either destroy the facility within hours or result in the complete loss of his remaining forces. The alien response was predictable. They considered Coleman's plan to be military suicide and refused to authorize what they saw as a pointless waste of human lives. But Coleman had learned something important about fighting the Devourers during his months of continuous combat. The creatures expected their enemies to value self-preservation above all else, and they had built their defenses accordingly. "They're counting on us to be reasonable," Coleman explained to his assembled officers as they prepared for an unauthorized assault on the Devourer stronghold. "They expect us to calculate odds and minimize casualties like every other species they've fought. But we're not every other species, and some things are more important than coming home alive." The assault that followed became legendary throughout the galaxy, not just for its success, but for what it revealed about human nature when faced with absolute evil. Coleman's forces didn't just destroy the Devourer facility, they eliminated it so completely that nothing remained but empty space where it had once stood. The victory came at a terrible cost, but it saved millions of innocent lives and dealt a blow to Devourer morale that reverberated throughout their entire command structure. As news of the victory spread throughout the galaxy, alien civilizations began to understand that they had asked for help from beings who operated according to principles that advanced societies had forgotten. Humans weren't just effective warriors, they were something far more dangerous and valuable. They were a species that understood the true cost of survival and was willing to pay any price to protect innocent life from those who would destroy it. The final battle of the war began when human intelligence located the Devourer home system, a region of space that had been dark for so long that most galactic civilizations had forgotten it existed. The massive fleet that assembled for the assault was primarily human, with alien vessels serving mainly as support ships and observation platforms. The aliens had learned that when humans went to war, it was better to stay out of their way and let them work. Fleet Admiral Tony Rodriguez commanded the largest human armada ever assembled as they approached the edge of the Devourer home system. His ships carried every weapon humanity had developed during the war, along with captured Devourer technology that human engineers had modified to be far more destructive than its original creators had intended. The fleet represented not just Earth's military might, but the accumulated anger of a species that had seen too much innocent suffering. The Devourer homeworld was unlike anything the galaxy had ever encountered. It wasn't a planet in any traditional sense, but rather a massive construct built from the consumed remains of thousands of worlds. Entire civilizations had been ground up and reformed into a single gigantic ship that pulsed with the stolen life force of billions of sentient beings. At its heart lay the central command structure that had orchestrated the invasion of the galaxy. Admiral Rodriguez opened communications to address both his human crews and the alien observers who had come to witness what everyone hoped would be the end of the Devourer threat. His words were broadcast across the galaxy, reaching every species that had suffered under the invasion, and every world that had lost loved ones to the creatures' insatiable hunger. "Today we finish what these monsters started," Rodriguez announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "We're not here to negotiate or to find some peaceful solution. We're here to make sure that no innocent being in this galaxy ever has to fear the Devourers again. Some enemies deserve nothing but complete and total destruction, and we're going to give them exactly what they deserve." The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Human forces employed every lesson they had learned. Throughout the war, combining conventional weapons with captured Devourer technology and tactics that no other species would have conceived. They didn't just attack the massive world ship, they systematically dismantled it piece by piece, ensuring that nothing would remain that could threaten the galaxy in the future. The Devourers fought with the desperation of creatures that finally understood they had encountered something more dangerous than themselves. They threw everything they had at the human fleet, using weapons that could destroy stars and defenses that bent the laws of physics. None of it mattered against an enemy that had learned to adapt faster than they could react. Captain Santos led the final assault on the central command structure, taking her ship directly into the heart of the Devourer construct. Her crew knew it was a suicide mission, but they also knew that someone had to ensure the job was finished completely. As her ship tore through the alien defenses, she opened communications with the Devourer command center one final time. "This is for every innocent life you consumed," Santos said, her voice filled with cold fury. "This is for every world you destroyed and every civilization you turned into food. You wanted to devour the galaxy, but you made one mistake. You tried to eat the one species that refuses to go down quietly." The explosion that destroyed the Devourer command center was visible from the edge of the star system. When the light faded, nothing remained of the massive construct except scattered debris floating in space. The central intelligence that had coordinated the invasion was gone, and with it died the last organized resistance the Devourers could mount. Admiral Rodriguez ordered his ships to methodically hunt down and destroy every remaining Devourer vessel in the system. This wasn't just a military victory, it was a complete elimination of a threat that had terrorized the galaxy for months. Human forces showed no mercy and took no prisoners, ensuring that the creatures that had consumed so many innocent lives would never threaten anyone again. When the last Devourer ship was destroyed, a strange silence fell over the communication channels. The alien fleets that had watched the battle from a safe distance maintained their positions as human ships began the systematic process of ensuring no trace of their enemy remained. The thoroughness with which humans approached the task of elimination left their alien allies both grateful and deeply unsettled. Ambassador Layara of the Galactic Council finally broke the silence that had lasted for nearly an hour. Her crystalline form flickered with emotions that no human could fully understand as she processed what she had witnessed. The species she had once considered primitive had just accomplished something that the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy had thought impossible. "Is it truly finished?" Layara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are the Devourers completely gone?" Admiral Rodriguez checked his tactical displays one final time before responding. Every sensor sweep showed the same result. No Devourer technology remained functional, no enemy ships were detected anywhere in the system, and the life signs that had once indicated millions of captured beings had finally been silenced. The threat that had consumed entire sectors of the galaxy was extinct. "It's finished," Rodriguez confirmed, his voice carrying the exhaustion of someone who had seen too much war. "The Devourers no longer exist. Your civilizations are safe, and they will never have to face this particular nightmare again." The aftermath of the victory brought challenges that no one had anticipated. The Galactic Council found itself in the unprecedented position of owing their continued existence to a species they had initially viewed as barbaric. Humans had saved the galaxy, but in doing so they had demonstrated capabilities that made many alien civilizations deeply uncomfortable about the future. The human fleet began its journey home, leaving behind a galaxy that had been forever changed by their intervention. The various alien species would spend decades debating the implications of what they had witnessed, trying to understand how a primitive species had succeeded where their advanced technology had failed. Some would conclude that violence was indeed sometimes necessary for survival, while others would argue that humanity's methods had been too extreme. Captain Santos addressed the Galactic Council one final time before the human fleet departed. For Earth, her words would be remembered and debated for generations as the galaxy struggled to understand what humanity's intervention meant for the future of galactic civilization. She spoke not as a conqueror or a liberator, but as someone who had done what was necessary to protect innocent life. "You asked us to become your warriors, and we did exactly that," Santos said, looking directly at the assembled alien representatives. "But understand this clearly. We didn't fight this war to become your rulers or your permanent military force. We fought because innocent beings were suffering and dying, and we had the ability to stop it. That's what humans do when faced with absolute evil." The human fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind a galaxy that was safe but fundamentally changed. The Galactic Council established new protocols acknowledging Earth as a sovereign power and humanity as the designated defenders against existential threats. They had learned that true peace sometimes required the capacity for absolute war, and that the most civilized response to evil was sometimes the most violent one. The various alien species would continue their peaceful existence, secure in the knowledge that somewhere in the galaxy lived beings who understood that survival sometimes required doing things that others couldn't or wouldn't do. Humanity had become the guardians they never knew they needed. Protectors who understood that the price of peace was eternal vigilance and the willingness to become monsters so that others could remain innocent. Years later, when young beings across the galaxy asked about the Devourer War, they would be told about the species that came from a small blue planet and reminded the universe that sometimes the most important battles are fought not by the most advanced, but by those who refuse to surrender when everything they value is threatened. Lisa Martinez rubbed her tired eyes and looked at the endless stream of data flowing across her screens. The Deep Space Monitoring Station Alpha 7 hummed quietly around her as she worked through another night shift. Outside the reinforced windows, Earth hung like a blue marble against the black of space. She had been tracking cosmic background radiation for 6 hours straight, and nothing interesting had happened. The coffee in her cup had gone cold hours ago. Lisa reached for it anyway, and made a face at the bitter taste. Working the night shift at Luna, Colony's most remote monitoring station, was not exactly the career she had dreamed of. When she joined the United Colonial Defense Force, most nights brought nothing but empty space noise and the occasional asteroid. Ping. Then something changed. A sharp tone cut through the usual background hiss of the universe. Lisa sat up straight and stared at her instruments. The signal was unlike anything in their databases. It carried clear mathematical patterns followed by what sounded like voices. Not human voices, something else entirely. "What the hell, Lisa?" whispered as she isolated the transmission and ran it through the computer systems. The mathematics were simple at first. Prime numbers in sequence. Then more complex equations that any intelligent species would recognize. But after the math came sounds that made her skin crawl. They sounded desperate. Lisa's hands shook as she reached for the emergency communication panel. She had trained for this moment, but never believed it would actually happen. First contact with alien intelligence was supposed to be theoretical. Something for scientists to debate in conference rooms, not something that would happen during her boring night. "Shift. Station Commander Sullivan, please report to communications immediately," Lisa spoke into her headset. Her voice cracked slightly. "We have a situation." Jake Sullivan arrived within minutes, still pulling on his uniform jacket. He was a tall man with gray hair and the kind of steady presence that made people feel calm during emergencies. Lisa had worked under him for 2 years and had never seen him lose his composure. "What do you have, Martinez?" Sullivan asked as he looked over her shoulder at the screens. "Sir, I'm picking up an artificial transmission from outside our solar system," Lisa said. She played back the recording. It starts with mathematical sequences but then becomes something else. Something that sounds like communication. Sullivan listened to the alien sounds with a frown. The voices rose and fell in patterns that seemed almost like pleading. Even without understanding the language, the emotional content was unmistakable. These beings were in trouble. "How long has this been broadcasting?" Sullivan asked. "The signal started 14 minutes ago," Lisa replied. "But sir, there's more. The transmission includes coordinate data pointing to a star system about 15 light-years from here. And there's what looks like a countdown timer." Sullivan studied the data readouts. The coordinates were clear enough, pointing toward a system that Earth's telescopes had cataloged but never studied in detail. The countdown showed approximately 72 hours remaining. Whatever was happening to these aliens, they did not have much time. "Contact Earth immediately," Sullivan ordered. "Priority Alpha protocols. Get me Admiral Murphy at Colonial Defense Command." Lisa's fingers flew over her console as she established the quantum communication link to Earth. Within an hour, the most powerful computers on Earth were analyzing the alien signal. Linguists, mathematicians, and xenobiologists who had spent their careers studying theoretical alien contact were suddenly faced with the real thing. Dr. Patricia Wong led the analysis team from her laboratory in Geneva. She was a small woman with intense eyes who had dedicated her life to studying communication patterns. For 15 years, she had worked on protocols for alien contact that everyone hoped would never be needed. The mathematical portions are straightforward. Dr. Wong explained during the emergency video conference that connected Earth's top scientists. They're establishing that they understand basic universal constants, but the vocal patterns are incredibly complex. Dr. Wong played sections of the alien transmission through sophisticated analysis software. Patterns emerged slowly. The alien language used tonal variations and harmonic frequencies that human throats could never produce. But underneath the strange sounds, emotional content came through clearly. "They're afraid," Dr. Wong continued. "Whatever's happening to them, they're terrified. The vocal stress patterns are unmistakable." Admiral Carl Murphy sat in the Pentagon's Secure Communications Center and listened to the reports from Luna Colony and the analysis teams. He was a career military officer who had spent decades preparing for threats that might never come. Now humanity faced something completely unprecedented. "Doctor, how long until we can understand what they're saying?" Admiral Murphy asked. "We're making progress rapidly," Dr. Wong replied. "The repetitive nature of the transmission helps. They're broadcasting the same message over and over, which gives us multiple data points for each word or phrase." Hours passed as teams around the world worked frantically to decode the alien language. The countdown timer in the transmission continued to tick down. 68 hours. 67 hours. Whatever crisis these aliens faced was approaching fast. Lisa Martinez remained at her post throughout the night, monitoring the signal and coordinating with Earth. She watched the countdown and wondered what could be threatening an entire alien civilization. Were they facing a natural disaster? An invasion? Something else entirely? The breakthrough came just before dawn on Luna Colony. Dr. Wong's team had identified enough linguistic patterns to construct a basic translation matrix. The words that came through their computers made everyone's blood run cold. "Hostile forces approaching our system," the computer voice read in emotionless tones. "Civilian population trapped on 3 worlds, unable to evacuate. Any sentient species receiving this transmission, please respond. We are peaceful beings. We have never harmed others. They are killing us. Please help us. We are dying." The message repeated endlessly with minor variations. Sometimes the aliens provided more details about their attackers. Sometimes they pleaded more desperately. But the core message never changed. An innocent species was being destroyed by hostile forces, and they were begging anyone in the universe to help them. Admiral Murphy stared at the translation scrolling across his screen. In all his years of military planning, he had prepared for defending Earth from alien invasion. He had never considered the possibility that aliens might need Earth to defend them. "How far away are they?" Admiral Murphy asked his technical staff. 15.7 light years, sir, came the reply. With our current propulsion technology, it would take approximately 300 years to reach their system. Admiral Murphy closed his eyes and thought about the classified project hidden deep in the Colorado mountains. The experimental full-drive technology that had never been tested beyond the edge of the solar system. Technology that might be able to cross 15 light years in a matter of days rather than centuries. Get me Dr. Chun Liu, Admiral Murphy sighed quietly. Tell him it's time to find out if his full drive actually works. The countdown timer showed 64 hours remaining.